Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Download with Joe. I'm Lewis, your host, founder of a company called LMC, Climate Technology Business, that specializes in talent solutions. As always, thankfully, joined by Joe Amador. Joe, how's things?
Yeah, things are good. It's cold here in Colorado. We got, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches of snow, which it's kind of late this year. I know a lot of people who don't live in a place at elevation like in Colorado, they think, oh, it's not growing up like Thanksgiving was you never had snow before Thanksgiving, and we're still 2 or 3 weeks away. So yeah, so I have some shoveling to do after but all in all, good.
Busy day ahead. Okay, cool. Um, Today we're going to be talking about M&A, a few interesting pieces. And I think there's maybe one or two partnerships to discuss. Perhaps
Yeah,
a little bit of a shorter episode just because of the volume. But uh, we like to think that we have our fingers on the pulse when it comes to anything in this space or most things in this space. So
yeah.
if today or any point during these episodes you think that we've missed a big event, whether it's M&A, partnerships, funding, and we haven't discussed it on a live, then please just add a comment. Would love to make sure that we include everyone or as many people as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So last week, for the first time, or one of few, we spoke a little bit about some renewable energy things that are taking place within the space, and a couple of the M&A pieces that we're going to discuss are very centered around renewables. So
Yeah.
the first one, IBM, and you can add further color to this, Joe. But the first one, IBM, most people know. If you don't, they acquired a business called Envisi. I think it was back in 2019, 2018, I think,
I
which
think a
is all
little,
around
maybe, yeah. It was a few years ago. Yeah.
ESG software.
Yeah.
I think,
Yep.
having spoken to a few people from
Yeah.
Envisi and IBM over the years, it was a pretty successful and continues to be a pretty successful M&A. And they've now
Yeah.
acquired another business, Joe. So talk us through that.
Yeah. So they acquired a business, Pracinto, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Pracinto. I'll before we get into that, and that's more around renewable energy asset management. I would actually take a step back prior to even Envisi. Envisi used to be Carbon Networks. They did a good job. A lot of companies from like 2008, 2010, 2012, they had to pivot away from being a carbon management platform to an energy management platform. A lot of reasons there, a lot to unpack there. I was actually kind of new to the industry, to the software industry at that time. Anyway, they were successful. They rebranded eventually to Envisi, and they, I think, partnered with IBM, based in Australia, but had operations around the country, around the world. I mean, but IBM had made a few interesting acquisitions prior to that. They had bought Maximo, which a lot of people now just think of Maximo as a product within IBM. The other, and that's less interesting, but still asset management and whatnot. They bought a company, I want to say around 10 years ago, called Tririga. And Tririga, interestingly enough, at the time, had a very sophisticated energy management product and carbon management product, and just kind of was doing ESG 10, 12 years ago, before ESG was as mainstream as it is now, before entrants like Measurable had even, I think, come onto the scene or had come on. So Tririga, interestingly, has become a little bit more of an IWMS, integrated workplace management solution, which touches the occupants of the building, or the tenants and the occupants of the building, provides them solutions and tools and capabilities, finding a desk, finding a room, finding where you are, right, wayfinding. And I don't know that they de-emphasized the energy management components of Tririga, but they weren't marketed as heavily. So now you bring Envisi, and in that article it said, we're combining Maximo, Tririga, which those have obviously a good connection: asset management, workforce management, workplace management, with energy management and ESG data management, Envisi. So in some ways, I saw it as just that move, as we want to build a bigger base. We're IBM, so integrating these solutions together shouldn't be a huge lift. And now with Pracinto, they're looking actually at renewable energy assets. And I saw this as kind of being a layer or a capability. A lot of what you're doing across Maximo, Tririga, and Visi renewable energy assets become kind of a growth opportunity for two reasons. One, there's just more renewable energy assets. So being able to go to them and say, we have a solution where you can monitor status, you can monitor performance, you can monitor work that needs to be done, like maintenance, plan tasks, plan service. And then for anyone who already has this suite and that is deploying renewable assets, we now have something new to sell you. We have a bigger share of wallet. And I think the big incumbents across OEMs, energy management, or the OEMs, the software giants, being able to expand share of wallet is a big driver of what I think they're doing, right? We already sell you these 5 things. Now we're going to sell you number 6 and number 7. And I also think on the buyer side, anecdotally, I've talked to owners of buildings, operators of buildings, facility management folks, and they generally tell me, I'm already spending so much money with this vendor. They have this new solution. I might as well just add that as well, rather than going out to market and trying to find something new. And I think that's also driving IBM. Is this something new, a new module, a new app, a new capability we can sell to people who are already using all of these things that are kind of combined and similar.
Yep.
So that's Pracinto. I would say renewables are going to touch different industries, different asset classes in different ways, right? A very high-rise building in downtown New York probably doesn't have a lot of renewables there, but you go to a warehouse, you go to an industrial site, might have a lot of renewables.
Was there any mention about the sale price or what it included?
This one, I don't think so, to be honest. And this is a challenge in our industry. It's rare. A lot of these acquisitions are small enough. I mean, even Invisi, I don't think there was any reported, and I would think Invisi was a little bigger. They're not material, right? So if the company just deems it not material to the overall business, and when you're IBM, you're tens of billions of dollars in revenue, they just don't disclose. Which people, I have the tracker on my website, right? People say, hey, it would be great if there were more actual references to price. I'm like, yeah, I know. It would be nice, wouldn't it? But
Yeah.
most of them are undisclosed.
We need insiders, Joe. We need to find these insiders.
Yeah.
Do you, before we touch on the next one, which again is renewables focus, do you see maybe a trend if you look at the smart buildings landscape and renewables?
Yeah.
There's obviously overlap there, but I can't think of many organizations that have a renewables application or component to, for example, a platform or even like a controls, right? Like they wouldn't. I wouldn't necessarily see them as a renewables player, but do you see something? Could that be a trend?
So there are definitely a few touch points, but I wouldn't say there's a direct these go together, right? If you're a JCI or any of their peers, one of your big businesses is energy performance contracting or energy service contracts, the ESCO model. I think it's very common to include renewables in those projects. A lot of that project or those types of projects would be retrofitting the HVAC systems, maybe upgrading the lights, maybe adding solar array. You might subcontract the actual deployment of the solar, but you can wrap that all together. And what you're delivering is energy savings that is financed. So there's that piece. The other big piece, if you have solar or wind, but I would say for an individual building, it's probably more common to have solar. You can deploy energy meters, which a lot of energy meters, Honeywell makes meters, Schneider makes meters. I think JCI white labels a meter. Siemens probably makes meters. There's a bunch of other companies that make meters. You can integrate that with any type of energy management building automation system. But in most cases, that's more for monitoring. And this, we sometimes talk about the single pane of glass. I just want all my data points in one place. That can be one data point. So that's the other most common touch point. Even when I was at Lucid, we had clients who said, can I deploy an additional meter for my solar? And then our solution could show you how much energy are you consuming and then how much is kind of given back to the building by the solar, and when you could kind of match those up from a time point of view. But broadly, you're right. If you are just a building, you might go to a completely different vendor or a portfolio and say, I want to deploy solar. There are definitely some software companies which we've covered, and there's one acquisition that actually kind of touches this that we're going to talk about here, where you say, we'll help you do the assessment of solar. Where should you be putting solar? Where does it make the most sense? There's all kinds of factors at play there. And then even help you with the procurement. And that can be outside of the building automation value chain, if you will.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. So let's touch on it then. So CBRE, they've acquired NRG. Slightly different
Yeah.
acquisition. What are your initial thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, and they acquired what they're calling it was a specific part of energy. Energy is a energy supplier. So any deregulated market, it's about half and half across our states in America. Some are regulated, some are deregulated. If they're deregulated, you can actually go and find a supplier. So who's actually generating the electrons for you? You can go find. So Texas is a good example. Illinois is a good example. California is regulated, but if you're a large consumer, there are some ways. They have a program called Direct Access, which you can buy. Um, it's a little different. And then there's other states that are not deregulated, right? Like they are regulated. So you are buying from the supplier and the deliverer. That's the distribution and the supply power. So energy works a lot of times with like large companies in their deregulated markets and says, we will help you between batteries, solar, just a new supply contract, right? We'll negotiate a better price for energy. But they also had a renewable energy advisory group. So team, services, consulting, and whatnot. And that was sold to CBRE. And you could argue there's probably a lot of big picture reasons, just being more focused. Being an energy supplier is kind of a commodity driven business. Selling consulting services is probably not.
Yep.
But CBRE touches a lot of the same types of clients, corporations that are just running real estate, managing real estate. Though instead of coming at it from, we're going to help you with your energy issues, they say, we're going to help you with your real estate issues. And you could argue renewable energy, I wouldn't say it's shifting from being an energy issue to a real estate issue, but in the eyes of a CBRE, they're just trying to beef up their capabilities to help their clients decarbonize, their clients, get to net zero, things like that. And having sometimes a team that just knows what's going on and can just jump in with projects and plug into a lot of your other groups, it makes sense.
And
so it's interesting. Go ahead. Yeah.
I think in your newsletter you were talking about partnership with JCI as well. Like, obviously, we just mentioned JCI.
Yeah.
Then, so
yeah.
why was that? Why is that an interesting partnership?
And that
with the M&A.
Yeah. So that partnership, I think, was about a month ago announced, and that was in international markets, and I think it was a limited number of I forget exactly, but like for 10 or 15 countries. But really, that is, I think a lot of these larger organizations, CBRE, JCI, any of them, when they look across the world, there are places where they're really strong. They have a really strong base of business. They have a really strong set of relationships. There's other places where maybe they're a little weaker, or there's just dynamics in that individual market where like we're just not great at servicing. A good example at the HVAC side, some countries, they buy a lot of heat pumps. Japan's a great example. They've been buying a lot of heat pumps for decades. So if you don't make heat pumps, you're not going to be a player there. The flip side, in America, until recently, we haven't bought a lot of heat pumps. So if you're just a heat pump maker, so Daikin bought Goodman because Goodman makes the more traditional residential split systems, and Daikin was mostly a heat pump manufacturer. So anyway, the one specifically JCI and CBRE, I just see that they both have a very deep relationship. It goes back at least to when JCI sold what it was calling its global workplace solutions business. And that was the actual kind of IFM, integrated facility management business that JCI owned. It was smaller than JLL and CBRE, but they ended up just selling that whole business to CBRE. And at the time, there was an announcement of, this is also going to become a bit of a kind of a supply partnership where we're, as JCI, your chosen HVAC and controls vendor. In reality, I don't know that CBRE would have gone to a client and said, hey, we have to sell you Metasys, the JCI product. We can't sell you the Siemens control system. I think they might have just preferred to sell more JCI. So I just see both of those companies with this kind of partnership looking at other places that they have complementary businesses and saying, hey, can we bring them together? Can we go to market together? And that was what I read the month ago, the JCI CBRE partnership. And I think those are going to be somewhat opportunistic, right? When there's a client where they can come together, they and maybe the reverse, right? We want to announce this so that some of our clients will come to us and say, hey, we work with both of you. Can we do something all three of us together?
Yep, makes sense. Interesting. And then IVE Energy's acquisition of Glow Energy, slightly different building focus or asset. Talk us through that.
Yeah. So IVE Energy is really focused. So they bought Glow. IVE Energy is very focused on multifamily, and the specific problem they solve. There's something called the split incentive. So specifically, what that means is I'm a we'll take an apartment. I'm an apartment building. I have 300 units. Every individual resident who lives here is likely paying his or her or their own utility bill. So what that means is if I'm the owner of the building, I have some common area, the halls, the game room, the offices for the staff. There is some common area. It's probably not a huge percentage. If you're the building and you want to put solar on the roof or in the parking lot, the only place you really get the return is in the common areas. Because if I put solar, I'm paying to put solar in my parking lot to generate solar energy, to reduce my energy bill. If I'm not paying my energy bills, my tenants are. So that's the split incentive. It's an issue, I would say, across all asset classes. So what IVE does is they basically have kind of a billing mechanism. They have some capabilities kind of around the ecosystem of just going to help put solar in the apartment building or the multifamily site, and then you can get a return. And I've seen a lot of these models. They're always a little bit different in terms of where the money flows, but it's typically there's the utility, there's the installer of the renewables, there's the vendor like an IVE, and then there's the resident. And they're all trying to get some benefit at some cost and trying to kind of equal that out to say, well, you're doing better because you're getting solar energy. Because the other dynamic here, especially for residential, you're probably not going to pay for any type of renewable energy project if you're a tenant renting on an annual basis, right? I might stay here for a few years, but I'm probably not going to put solar. Or I've seen sometimes you can put these vertical wind turbines like on a balcony. I've sometimes seen that, usually at a condo. It's not going to work. So IVE Energy solves that. Glow seemed to be a very similar company, and I just saw this as kind of a scale up move, right? We just want to be bigger. Not unlike, if you remember back, this isn't in our industry directly, but VTS and Hightower, they merged, or VTS bought Hightower. They were both kind of like real estate financial management platforms, both growing, but competing very directly. And sometimes when you have a peer that you compete with, especially at an early stage, this is a trend across all markets. Sometimes you're spending so much money to capture clients that you're really just fighting each other, and you're almost like killing each other, when if you team up, you just sell that solution. And instead of fighting each other, you're just kind of fighting to get new clients. A good example that, at least in Silicon Valley, you talk about is Lyft and Uber, where a lot of subsidized rides for people. It was great for us to ride Lyft and Uber, but at the end of the day, it was challenging for either of those businesses to become profitable because they were both competing so directly. So that's what I saw at Glow. I mean, there's probably some ads on specific asset classes, regions of the country and whatnot, though.
Yeah. Okay. Moving away from traditional M&A that we talk on these lives.
Yeah.
One that you saw, and you corrected me when I said we don't. I've not really come across many acquisitions within the event space, but I think you're right in saying that there is a lot of activity there outside of this industry, and an event that most people would know, or a lot of people would know within the real estate space, Blueprint. They've been acquired by Inman. Talk us through the details on that one.
Yeah, exactly. So Inman is a media company, I would say, for real estate specifically. And there's a few of them, but they have events. They have a newspaper, or an online newspaper. The events can be across real estate, from just looking into rates, looking into the status of the financial performance of the real estate assets, all kinds of events. And some of them are very localized and small. In the New York area, we're going to bring all the realtors together and talk about real estate at the residential level. So Inman, big company. They bought Blueprint, the company that has started Blueprint, Connective. They have a few different businesses, or a few different events. I mean, you could say they're each an individual business, different industries entirely. But their model seems to be start a conference and sell it. Not unlike a lot of other industries, right? We start something, we're a startup, we sell it. They get bigger, they sell it. It kind of scales up. So there's a model from everything I've been able to read and learn and talk to people, where you can start an event and your goal is, I want to get this to a certain size and then sell it, and then I'll keep moving. And so it makes sense for Inman to try to get an event on its docket, if you will. They can market to all the people who are already going to Inman events, which I'm sure are thousands, if not tens of thousands, when you add it all up. They can say, this is the innovation event. So it makes sense from that point of view. The team at Blueprint, which really has done an excellent job of curating this event from 2021 was maybe the first year. So they've done it for 4 years now. They have a fifth. It's grown very nicely. It's always a good event. A lot of people I talk to say this was a really good event, or I didn't know what to expect, and I was really surprised. These events have certainly carved out a bit of a niche for themselves. Blueprint's kind of known as where all the investors go. It's not only investors, but that's the best place to go in our industry to find all the investors that you might want to meet. So it makes sense on both sides. I think the model for Connective always was probably build this up enough and then sell it. Who knows, you get a good offer, you might sell early, you might not get a great offer, you might continue to build. The team behind Blueprint, like Vic and David, who I know well, you probably know them, they're sticking with Blueprint. So I think the continuity that we'll see should be there for Blueprint as an event. There's probably going to be some changes, just ads and new features, new capabilities, new features and new sessions. But I think it's good. I think the other big question, which is maybe something I get asked a lot, is just the dynamics in our space around events. Green Build, which is next week, is the one event that at some point the U.S. Green Building Council sold it to a big events company. So that's the closest thing I can think of to this, where all the other events in our industry, they're still just run by the group who started them. Maybe that will change. But there's a churn to events, I would say, and there's also niches that an event might create between we're focused on commercial or multifamily. There are some existing events that try to add more tech content. There's new tech events. So a bunch of dynamics here. It's interesting to watch. And it's still kind of in the depths of conference season. So, we'll also get feedback on how did that event go.
How did the event go? Who's going to win? I like it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Blueprint, I wasn't able to go this year, but has always been a phenomenal event. So that's an interesting news update. I think that's where we should park it for today. We promise to keep it relatively short and sweet. We'll be back next week with another theme. We do have a couple of guests over the next 2 to 4 weeks joining us, so please tune into those. And I think that's it from me. Anything else, Joe?
Yeah. No. Have a great week, everyone, or rest of your week, and we'll see you next week.
Cheers, guys.